Hey everybody, my name is Kelly. I'm here for a Thrifty Notion to share a very exciting video with you. This is our first sewing tutorial that comes with a pattern, and this has actually been in the works since about 2019. This pattern was made, the instructions were basically written, and we kind of backburnered it because we couldn't really do a big launch at that point in time. We came into some new inventory, things got crazy, pandemic, etc. So we were just really excited to finally be releasing it. Before I jump into the pattern, I just wanted to let you know, if you're new to who we are at a Thrifty Notion, we are primarily a secondhand and dead stock fabric and notion store, but we do carry a few select, consciously curated new items as well. We are very passionate about sustainability, and that will come into play in just a moment when I talk more about the pattern. So the tutorial is going to be on how to make this bag, which we are calling the Monstera Tote. I wonder why. It has a double panel on the outside, a facing on the inside, which is optional if you don't want to include it, but it's not that much effort to add in that extra step, and it's fully lined. And later on in the video, at the end actually, I will be discussing different ways you can customize this, so if you're interested in that, stay until then, and we will talk more about ways you can kind of level it up a little bit. So before I jump into the tutorial, I just want to give you guys some insight into the pattern. It is a print at home pattern. There are 15 pages and then instruction pages. You obviously don't have to print the instruction pages if you don't want to use extra paper. You can just read them off of your computer, tablet, phone, whatever. But the pattern is sold on a pay what you want model, and the reason we're doing that is because every single item in our zero waste studio, so this includes this pattern. There will be kits for this bag available eventually as well, but we don't have them ready yet. So keep it on our Instagram for that, because we will announce there when they are ready. But essentially, our Zero Waste Studio is just a place where we can have inspiration, tools available for you, and then also ready-made items if you'd prefer to just purchase the items. So if you guys have seen our festival blankets or our pot holder rugs available there, that's what those are. And the goal with our Zero Waste Studio is that every single item that we sell, the proceeds from those items will go to support our sustainability initiatives. So right now we are saving to put solar panels on our building. And we're super excited about that, because with how big our roof is, it ends up being that we're going to be producing a lot more electricity than we use, which is a little bit sad because we don't get compensated for that. Where we live, that's just not an option, but it's nice because we'll be helping produce some sustainable electricity. So we're really excited about the idea of doing that. We're just trying to make it happen. So we're trying to find a way to offer something to you guys that is directly going to support our goals. So in case it wasn't clear, I just want to let you know that the reason the pattern is sold on a pay what you want model is because we want sewing to be accessible. So we do have a $1 option if you're unable to pay more than that for the pattern, but you want to make this bag. Totally understand, and there is that option for you. But we also have higher price point options for anyone who believes in what we're doing and wants to help support our goal to put solar panels on our building. Then every dollar you pay for the pattern will go directly to that fund, and that's a great way to help support us and help us get to that goal faster. Okay, so you've seen what the tote looks like. We're going to jump into how to sew the tote, and that is going to happen right now. Alright you guys, we're jumping right into sewing the bag. I did not include printing out the pattern, taping it together, or cutting out my fabric in this video just because I felt like it's a pretty straightforward. Also, the instructions on printing out and taping together the pattern are pretty comprehensive. There's a whole page at the beginning of the instructions all about the pattern itself. But if you have any questions after reading that, feel free to email us, shoot us a message on Instagram, or comment down below and we will get back to you. So what you can see here are all of the pieces that I cut out. I have my lining, facing, and both of my outer pieces, as well as my straps. Normally you will only have 2 straps if you're using fabric and you're making it like a tube and flipping it right side out, which is what the instructions tell you to do. However, if you're using leather, I highly recommend just cutting out your pieces and either using one piece if it's a very thick leather, or if you're using leather that's upholstery weight like the leather that we sell, I recommend cutting 4 pieces so that you can sew 2 together for each strap, which is what you see me doing here. I just cut my pieces skinnier than the pattern calls for. I cut them at about 1 1/4 inch thick, and then I'm sewing them together. One thing that I'd like to note here is that the straps that come with the pattern are pretty long, and what I didn't realize when I was sewing my bag together is that this top stitching step actually caused my leather to stretch out, which is funny because it actually looks like I'm stretching my leather right now while I'm sewing it, but I'm really not. I'm just using both hands to feed my strap through the machine so that I can get a straighter top stitch. The main reason I'm doing this is because I'm sitting so far away from my machine. Normally I would sit a lot closer, but I wanted to get it in the shot a little bit better. So I will say definitely sit your machine on the very edge of your table when you're sewing so that you have better control. But I also want to talk about this because I want to say that I've noticed a tendency with beginners to pull the fabric from the back like that, and if you're pulling on your fabric, it can cause your stitches to break. So if you are new to sewing and you're noticing that your stitches are breaking a lot, I would check that you're not accidentally pulling on it, and I think it's just kind of a natural thing that we do without realizing. I also wanted to note the strap length to let you guys know that the straps are very long on the pattern to begin with. I like the straps on my bags pretty long so that I can comfortably stick my hand into my bag when it's on my shoulder, but I recognize that not everyone wants them that long and not everyone has arms as long as mine, so I just wanted to note that so you know to check the length before you sew your bag. Okay, boy, I did not know I had that many things to say about the straps. I just can't help myself but give tips as often as possible and little things to look out for because I know that I appreciate that when I'm learning, and I never know what level of sewist the person is watching this video, so I want to give as many tips as I can. With that said, my last tip before moving on to the next step on the bag would just be to use pins if you need them. There are a lot of straight lines on this bag, so there are a lot of sections where if you're an experienced sewist, you probably don't need them. But if you're new to sewing, I definitely recommend it. There are also a couple spots where you're trying to line seams up where they can be helpful. I actually wish I had used them on a couple spots on the bag. Most of my seams lined up pretty nicely, but there's a couple spots that could have been a little better, and that's just real life. So I just wanted to put that out there. I also wanted to say that pressing your seams as you sew can make it a little bit easier to line the seams up as well, and it can lead to a nicer result at the end. It's not crucial, but it does help, and that's what I normally do, so I would also recommend that. Alright, you guys, the next step on the bag is going to be sewing the facing together and attaching it to your lining. The first thing you're going to want to do is take the two facing pieces and put them right sides together and sew up the little tiny short sides on them. And after you do that, you will be taking that facing and either pressing at your ironing board the bottom edge up about 1/4 of an inch or 1/2 an inch depending on what mood you're in. But you also could top stitch it like I did. I don't know exactly why I did it this way because I've never sewn the bag this way before, but you know, variety is the spice of life, and that is also an option. Next, you'll set the facing aside for just a moment, and you're going to want to sew up the side seams and the bottom of the bag lining. You'll start with sewing the two long side seams, ignoring those little cutout corner sections, and then you'll also sew up the bottom of the bag, leaving an opening so you can turn the bag right side out later. This will come into play when you attach the lining to the outer portion of the bag. Once you've sewn up the sides and the bottom of the tote, you'll have to deal with those little corner sections. And the way that you line these up, and you can see what I'm doing too in the footage, is to take the two ends on the corners and match up the seams. And when you match those seams up, you will end up with a straight edge made from that little corner section, and you're going to sew right across that straight edge. It's kind of hard to explain, but I hope that you can see what I'm doing in the footage. So when you're doing this step and you're lining up those two seams, make sure that you're pressing the seam allowances in opposite directions so that you don't have all of the bulk on one side. You also want to make sure that you are not twisting the seam halfway through. So as you could see when I was doing that bottom seam, I checked to make sure it was straight all the way across and that it wasn't twisting, and that the seam allowances are facing the same way on both ends of the bag. Now you're going to turn the lining right side out and take your facing and place it around the top of the lining. You'll have those raw edges matched up and the side seams matched up, and the facing will just kind of wrap around the top of that lining and become part of it. So you're really just top stitching it down. You will want to make sure you're lining up those side seams, and this is a good step to insert a custom tag if you have one you want to use, which you can see me doing here. Now comes the fun part. We get to work on the outside of the bag. As you can see, I'm laying out my fabrics like they will look when I have the bag finished. I like to do this and then flip the bottom layer up to match the fabric which you'll see me doing right now. And I do that because with leather, if you are working with leather, it can be kind of hard to remember which side you're trying to use and which side is the right side, especially since both sides look nice. And so I just do it this way to make sure that I'm using the right side, and it just helps my brain a little bit. So you'll just be putting the leather and fabric pieces of both sides of your bag together, and then after you do that, you're going to take that seam, push it up toward the fabric side of the bag because that will reduce bulk, and then you'll just top stitch right across that seam on both sides of the bag. After that, you will line them up right sides together, and you will sew them together the same way you sewed the lining bag together, but instead of leaving a gap at the bottom where you're going to turn it right side out, we don't have to leave that gap because we already left it in the lining. Once you have your bag turned right side out, this is a good time to check that the straps are a good length for you and then measure where you want them to go. I like to put mine around 3 to 4 inches in from the side seams, and on this bag specifically, I did decide to split the difference and put them 3.5 inches in from each side seam, which I really liked the placement of. I was also very careful to make sure that the strap wasn't twisted in any way, and I clipped it in place before inserting the bag into the lining. And you'll want to insert the bag with the right side of the bag facing out and the right side of the lining facing inward. So the right side's together, but it'll look funny because you're going to have the wrong side of the lining on the outside while you're sewing it. And then you're just going to want to top stitch all the way around the top of the bag. And once that's done, you can flip it right side out using the hole in the bottom of the lining. Then you will sew that hole closed. You can either do it by hand if you want it to be more hidden, or you can sew it by machine. On this one, I did just sew it by machine because it's in the bottom of the bag. No one's ever going to see it. And after that, your last step is just to top stitch around the whole top edge of the bag just to hold it all in place and keep the lining toward the inside. My phone died at this moment, so I did not get footage of me top stitching that part. But you've seen me top stitch a lot of things in this video. You've seen me sew a lot of straight lines. It's essentially that all over again, just sewing in a circle around the top edge of the bag. And from there, your bag is done. Alright you guys, I told you that if you stayed till the end of the video, I would have some tips for how you can customize this bag. So the first thing I want to show you is the first version of the Monstera Tote. So really the name came from this bag initially. I found a couple of scraps of this fabric in fence line. They were the only pieces we had left of this fabric, and it was before Cotton and Steel re-released the print. So it was sold out everywhere. It was the only piece of fabric that they had left, and I really like this fabric, so I was like, well, I'm gonna find something to make with it. And when I took it home, I saw it next to this scrap of leather that I had cut off of a leather shirt. I had cropped it, and I was like, done, tote bag, because I used to make totes similar to this with like vinyl bottoms back when I thought I was gonna, you know, sell things that I sewed. That was a time. But I did remember that I used to do that, and so I used the same kind of style to make this tote. I didn't have any more matching fabric to make the handles, so what I did was use metal grommets, the large size, and some rope. This is just from the trim section, but you also could use any other trim. I would just suggest something that's a little sturdy and strong. Or you can use fabric and still do the grommet method if you want to do it that way. I also added a snap closure, which these are really easy to install. You just have to put them in before you finish the bag, because you want them, you know, to be hidden on the inside. So you add them on before you sew the lining and the outside of the bag together. But they're really easy to install. They come with instructions, so no worries. I did add like a little bit of extra leather to the back of them just to add reinforcement and durability there, which I think is kind of a fun detail. Another thing I did on this bag was add a little bit of structure to the bottom. It's kind of gotten worn out over time. I can't remember what I used for the like strength in this. I think it was just a really thick interfacing, like one of the home deck interfacings, but I added this extra panel to the bottom of the bag that has, yeah, I can actually see it now, this like thicker interfacing, and it just adds a tiny bit of structure to the bottom. So this is still pretty flexible, but it does add a little bit of extra structure, like I said. But you could go for something a lot stronger. One thing that I've thought about using like as an upcycle would be, I think everyone at some point in time has had those really thin cutting boards, the ones that are like labeled like meat, fish, vegetables, and they're really thin and basically non-existent. And then, you know, eventually they get warped and they get all wonky. So one thing I thought about was using like a couple layers of that, and you might have to very, very carefully and lightly iron it to get it flat because they curl, like we mentioned. But if you took a couple of those and ironed them with a pressing cloth on low heat to get them flat, and then you wrapped them in fabric and put those in the bottom of your bag, you could totally do that. And I feel like that would be a good way to add structure as well. I wouldn't like go out and buy them for that purpose, but you guys know what I mean. We all have stuff laying around that we're not using that we don't want to throw away, but if we can find a use for it, then that's awesome. Another thing you could do to customize this bag is add pockets on the outside or the inside, super simple patch pockets, or you could go all out and do like a zipper pocket. You could add a zipper to the top of the bag. One way that I've done that was super easy was to, wow, super is my word today, y'all. So one easy way that I've done this is to add little, I can't describe this to you. Maybe I'll draw a picture or find an example. I'll find an example photo and put it right here. This is what I suggest you do if you want to put a zipper in the top of the bag. So they won't really be attached in this corner, but I find that attaching zippers that way is a little bit difficult for me anyway. And this is coming from someone who has a degree in apparel design, okay? I have sewn a lot of things and I don't enjoy putting zippers in like that. Can I do it? Yes. Do I like the experience? No. I will say if you want to do that, you can't really do this grommet strap method because they can't go through this area if there's a zipper there. But options. So basically pocket zippers, feet, you could add those little feet to the bottom of your bag. There are tons of options. Adding reinforcement is great if you want to be able to set it down and it kind of hold itself up. If that's the case, you probably want to, oh, sorry, plant. If that's the case, then you probably also want to add more durability to the bag itself and think about maybe a more structured leather. This leather is very soft, but the leather that I use, the leather that's in our shop right now, it's also fairly soft, but it definitely has more structure than the one that I used for the original bag. And you could add more structure to it as well by interfacing the lining. That would be a good way to add structure where you don't have to add interfacing or anything to the leather itself. So I feel like I've sufficiently rambled. Hopefully that was helpful and inspiring. Y'all just got a side of me that has never been on YouTube before, and I would like to formally apologize for that. I hope you have a great day. I hope that we'll see you in a future video. See you. I hope you'll be back. Thanks for watching. I can't wait to see all of the bags you guys make with this pattern. Please tag us at a Thrifty Notion and use the hashtag #Monstera Tote so that we see all of your beautiful creations. I am so pumped to see the way you guys color block this one, whether it be with leather or vinyl or 2 different fabrics. It's just so exciting, and this has been a long time coming, so I'm so glad to see it finally go out into the world.